What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Children of the Vault. And as always, you'll find a link to the Fall of X playlist at the end of this video. But for those of you guys who are getting caught up, while the entirety of the mutant population has either been banished to the white hot room, a place beyond all space and time, or those who are remaining on Earth are being hunted down by Orchis and basically taken out, Cable and Bishop, two really interesting and really cool mutants, are launching an attack against the city. Why? Because the city is home to hyper-evolved humans who are using this opportunity in Fall of X to strike against Earth and basically take over the planet. So what they end up doing here in launching this attack is they take just like this giant cannon, because what are Cable and Bishop if not two guys walking around with gigantic guns, and they end up firing off these micro singularities towards the city, right? Mini black holes. Now, by no standard of measurement is this expected to actually work. They don't intend for it to be able to take out the city. And in fact, what happens here, just to show you guys how hyper evolved these guys are, 3 seconds before the first micro singularity hits, the city mind picks up a small energy spike below its southern border. The city mind, of course, being this just gigantic computer that runs the whole place, right? Immediately, 3 members of the city are sent to basically investigate. Half a second before the first micro singularity hits, time slows to a crawl and a sudden heavy night falls over the city, right? 0.1 picoseconds. Fraction of a second after the first micro singularity hits, one of them has already sealed the singularity in a gravity Klein bottle and the night lifts, right? 83 members of the city are dead and 12 city blocks have ceased to exist. Now that's the crazy thing about it, is because if the other 3 had hit, it would have done some damage, but by no means was it enough to take out the city. But what happens after this is crazy, because Bishop and Cable jump in this car with a minigun on the front, which looks amazing, and they immediately launch an attack against the city. Now again, they're taken out as well, and that's what's so cool about this, is because one of these guys is like, did you really believe an attack like this was going to work? Right? Firing mini black holes at us and then rolling up here like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome with a minigun. Did you really believe that was going to work? And the response of Cable is, actually, no, we didn't expect that at all. What we were expecting is for this to do exactly what it was supposed to do, to be a distraction. And when this guy turns around, the entirety of the Orchis force is descending onto the city. The whole of Orchis, right? All these sentinels, all these Stark sentinels, the whole 9 yards. Literally, it's 94% of solar particle beam absorbed, deflected, significant damage sustained. Orchis forces incoming, the city's under attack, protect the city. And that's when Cable's just like, surprise. So the question has to be asked, how is Orchis even involved here? Because remember, one of the first things that the occupants of the city did is they kind of instilled this quote unquote virus, if you want to call it that, but basically this kind of subconscious and even conscious thought in the mind of every single human being across the world and in the Orchis facilities that are orbiting the sun, that basically the children were here to save them. So there's no reason for anybody to stand against the children of the vault. It was a genius maneuver, right? Like, why conquer a world by force when you can basically use subliminal messaging or a telekinetic or telepathic virus to basically get them to see you as their god? Well, what had happened in the last video when Cable was freed from Orchis by Bishop is, before he left, he had planted a subliminal thought in one of its mid-level scientists that basically created paranoia. And what this guy would do is he would basically just start to panic, right? He would start to freak out, that he would say, there's a massive calamity, there's a massive threat. In essence, waking Orchis up to the threat that the city poses, but doing it in such a way to where Orchis would see the city as a threat and basically ignore Cable and Bishop. And that's exactly what happens, right? Within 23 seconds, this kind of hive mind, right? These combined brains, more or less, like really actual like brains that work together, analyze the city, immediately determine it to be a threat, and launch an entire strike. Now, here's what's crazy. In addition to the forces that they've sent there, we're told that from the headquarters on the surface of the sun, Orchis sends down Sol hammer strikes, each with yotatons of destructive force. Now, to give you guys perspective here, right, as I understand it, I had to look this up. I had to do some research on this, right? 27 yotatons is equivalent to like 540 quintillion, right? So one step above trillion, 540 quintillion Tsar bombs. The Tsar bomb is the most powerful atomic device ever detonated on Earth. It was so powerful, it scared the heck out of humanity. Like Russia was like, we're never doing this. And the United States is like, yeah, you probably shouldn't, right? I mean, the fact that this much energy is being fired at the Earth, if this wasn't a comic book, and even for a comic book, it stretches the limits of credulity. I'm not a physicist, I'm not a guy that studies atomic energy, but I would have to believe a level of destructive force on this scale would like shatter the planet or set the atmosphere on fire, any number of things, right? It wouldn't just penetrate the entirety of the Earth's atmosphere and just hone down rainfire on this city and everything would be okay. It's nuts, right? It's just an astronomical amount of power. But regardless of how you slice it, it's still not enough. The city's able to withstand this concussive force. And it's really just because of the level of the force field that the city has. And that's why, like, you can kind of cook the books and you can kind of make this work, because one of the things to remember is that the city is thousands, if not millions of years ahead of normal humanity. The level of technology they have is astronomical, right? It's just on a whole nother level. And so despite all of this, the children of the vault just tear the forces of Orchis apart. I mean, they rip these things apart piece by piece. And what's so funny about this is, for those of you guys who read Marvel Comics back in the 90s, specifically X-Force, the relationship between Cable and Bishop reminds me of that, because there's this point where in the middle of this whole firefight, right, this massive battle on the city, they're arguing about their rifles. They're arguing about which one's more powerful. And it makes perfect sense, because for people like me who grew up with X-Men the Animated Series, and it's what got me into Marvel in the first place, the biggest argument I would have with my friends is whose gun was better, Cable or Bishop, right? And like they're bickering back and forth, right? Like, for example, Bishop talks about how the P-832 0-point plasma cannon was like an artificial star, or at least it used an artificial star as a power source, and it's made of self-repairing smart metal. They only made a few in the 43rd century during the Beyonder Phoenix War, right? And the response of Cable is like, I've got 3, right? The Omega Pulse Rifle is the better weapon, right? That's the one that he runs. He's like, the fact that I have 3 of these weapons that you're talking about and I still choose mine means mine is better than yours. So here's what I want to know from you guys in the comment section. Which gun is better, Cable's or Bishop's? You guys be the ones to decide, right? We might even make a poll, right, to get an answer to that question, but which one do you all think is better? But the fact remains here, right? These guys, for the most part, are able to hold their own. But like the whole bickering back and forth between these two guys is one of these things where it hits so well, but really it only impacts you if you were reading the X-Men between like 2004, let's say maybe like 2006, running all the way up to like 2010 in the Heroic Age, right? So like Messiah Complex, Messiah War, Second Coming, The 12 Lights, Ex Necrotia, right? All those different story arcs, which we need to go back and remaster those. We might pick like a day, like Sunday. Still, it's just one of those really, really cool things, because like Bishop and Cable were trying to kill each other all the time. And they were like jumping through the time stream, and it was super dope, right? It was really, really amazing to see. But the fact that like it's one of these things where even when they're talking, Cable says like, this is where we go our separate ways, right? I've placed the map of the city I got from Martillo in your mind, right next to the sense memory of the first time you got shot, so that you don't forget. And he says, I'm counting on you, Bishop, against my better judgment. And so the response of Bishop here, and this is kind of like the buddy cop type thing, he's like, you don't trust me and I don't blame you, right? Like I literally chased you through the time stream trying to kill you and your adopted daughter, Hope Summers. And he says, but after all we've been through, all we've done to each other, have you ever known anything to stop me once I've set my mind on something? And that's an accurate point, because literally Cable's like, fair point. Here's the thing. After reading this, I'll be honest with you guys, man, I want to see a Cable and like Bishop buddy cop comic, right? Where like they're running through the time stream. Like I want to see that, man. And so what we do here is we pick up with Serafina. Now, Serafina is one of the more powerful members of the Children of the Vault. And the reason why I say that is because Serafina has like the ability to communicate with and control machines. She can control minds. She can cloak herself. She can do all kinds of really, really cool stuff. And in a world of technology, I mean, she could literally take down the planet by herself if she chose to, right? I mean, just imagine what would happen if it was something like back in, what was it, the 80s or the 90s, when Magneto issued a blanket EMP across the world. It was during Fatal Attractions, when he EMP'd the world, and like countless planes were falling out of the sky, hospital equipment was failing, people were dying. I mean, it was mass pandemonium. She could do that exact same thing, except this time, there's no way for humanity to get anything back online again. And even if they do, she immediately takes it right back down, right? So that's how powerful this chick is, powerful enough to kill a world. But what she does is she actually flies above the city to kind of get a bird's eye view of what's going on. Because from her perspective, none of this should be happening. Humanity should be bending the knee to the Children of the Vault, right? They call them the Children of Tomorrow. They're saviors, the people that will lead them into a better future. Humanity should revere these guys, not be waging war against them. Now, one of the things that does take place here, which I'm really excited to see, is the return of Muerte 13. We don't really know anything about this guy, but what we do know is that at some point, this dude went on like an antimatter rampage and just took out huge sections of the city. Imagine what this guy would do on Earth, right? A living antimatter reactor. This guy is kind of an answer to the question, what if Blue Marvel were a villain, right? Like a guy who's powered by antimatter and using any of his abilities could just wipe out huge sections of the world like that. What do you do against a guy like that, right? They bring him back because it's basically a last-ditch effort. Even the citizens of the city, the Children of the Vault, were terrified of this guy. That's why he's called Muerte 13. There were only 13 versions of him, right? For the other members, you have like Martillo 131, right? 131 versions of this guy, right? 131 generations. There's only 13 generations of this guy. That's how scary he was. So like they shut the whole project down, right? They were like, we're done. This guy's not coming back. This guy's way too crazy and deadly. We're not playing this game. So it's one of those crazy moments. Like I'm excited to see what he does, but focusing on Serafina here for a second, when she gets above and she starts looking through everything, her ability to control minds also comes with her ability to read minds. And over the course of this whole investigation, she says like, I can see that we are going to win this, right? I can see that like we cannot lose. And then she says, behind all of it, behind everything, I see something else, enormous, exterior to space, arranging events like flowers, immense intelligence, thinking vast and terrible thoughts. And she says, it's coming, the Dominion. Now, here's the thing about this. This can be interpreted in a couple of different ways, but before we get to that point, what I do want to do is focus on what's happening with humanity, because where initially humanity was unified, right, through the singular ideology of seeing the Children of the Vault as the Children of Tomorrow, now it's all starting to fall apart. Now they're all starting to wage war against each other, right? They're attacking each other, so on and so forth, right? The message starts to divide. What initially started off as a coming together of humanity is now turning into a fracturing of humanity, right? So like basically social media. And so following this, you switch to Bishop for a quick second when he starts to go against Muerte 13, but Bishop's ability is to absorb virtually any form of energy and channel it back. There are limits, so he's like a glass of water. If you pour too much water in it, it's gonna overflow. The same thing with Bishop. If he absorbs too much energy without letting energy off, he'll explode. What you saw in X-Men Days of Future Past, the death of Bishop, that's actually pretty accurate. That's a very accurate depiction of how Bishop's power works. Too much power absorption, not letting enough power off, he'll literally explode, right? But Serafina, when she starts to realize what's going on, right, starts to see like this idea of dominion, she says, the city, the humans are not what they seem. I must warn the city. Our strategies are compromised, our information incomplete. And she goes running into the core, right? City, do you hear me? The humans are not alone. They're not even in control. It wears them like a glove. A mind beyond comprehension forces their every move. And that's when this person comes out of nowhere and says, I'm flattered, but you're giving me too much credit. Forces their every move. Nobody held a gun to their head. That's when we find out it's Cable. This is such an important thing, right? Because something to know about Cable. This guy's level of power, his telepathy and telekinesis is on a whole different level. 9 times out of 10, you don't see it because he's usually always using those 2 abilities to keep the techno-organic virus, right? That metal on his arm, to keep it from like eating the rest of his body and literally killing him. But in those rare moments when he lets his telepathy and telekinesis run wild and he stops focusing on his techno-organic virus, he's the most powerful telepath and telekinetic on Earth. It's crazy how overpowered this guy is. And I gotta say, man, if this dude is really controlling the minds of everybody on the planet all at one time, then it's good to see that this guy is back to form. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Make sure you click this link to the Fall of X playlist in order to get caught up, and I will catch you all later. Peace.